Alright guys, so let's take a look at a rig that I've been working on for a while now. It's basically a snake rig, right? I've been building a snake rig for one of my snakes, obviously. Anyway, so let's take a look at it. Let's review it and see what's happening behind the hood. Okay, so let's start with the controls, right? So the controls, let's start with the main control. That's the main control over there. So this control is used to move the entire snake over, right? Along the path, really, right? So by moving that control, you get to move the entire snake along the path, and you get to move and control the speed at each interval, right? So it's just one axis. You get to animate just one axis, and the entire snake moves along the path. So let me demonstrate that for. Okay, so yeah, so that's just basically it. So let's move on to the secondary controller. So these controllers are just your basic posing controllers, right? They pose the snake itself, right? If you want to get in there and then make a bunch of custom shapes, right? So I wanted to leave this. This was very important for me because I didn't want the curve, the same curve that the snake is moving along to determine its shape as far as the head movement and all this other stuff, right? I still wanted more control, so I added a few more controls on it, right? So these bones are just for extra control on the body and the shape of the snake, right? You get to pose it and then you move it as usual. All right, so let me go quickly on the mechanics of the rig. So basically this rig, right? Now I know it looks like it's above the ground. Later on, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna push these bones down, right? I was just doing this for visual purposes so that I can see what I was doing, right? So initially on the final rig, what's going to happen is that I'm gonna see now they're on the ground. So I'm just gonna move those bones just so you can move them independently of the other bones, right? There you go. So later on, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna push them down so that I can, so that we can all be, so they can look visually pleasing. But for now, I'm gonna leave them there because I'm still working on it. All right. So then let's discuss the the two basic mechanics that are moving the snake. So the first mechanic is influenced by a curve, right? And that's the up and down movement. The up and down movement is influenced by this curve over here. Let me zoom in. There we go. There we go. All right, so that curve over there is the one that's driving the up and down movement, right? The up and down movement. It enables the snake to be attached to the ground and also to traverse hills and crevices, right? Up and down type stuff, right? All over the mesh. There's no hill that is big that this mechanic won't go over, right? So it's kind of neat. I had rotational issues when I first started, but I managed to fix those. Yeah, so that's a neat little trick or a neat little mechanic that's happening right there. All right, so that's the first mechanic. And then let's move on to the second one. The second one is the side-by-side movement along the curve, right? So this mechanic, and the reason why I broke them down like this was so that I could make sense of the rig as I was creating it. In the future, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one curve or one object for the traversing and the shrink wrapping along the terrain, and also movement along the curve. Let me show you. So the second mechanic is the along the curve rotation and whatnot, right? So this mechanic is responsible for the curve moving along the curve, right? Especially the rotations along the curve and deforming along the curve. I broke it down because earlier on I couldn't get the one object to behave and do the one thing, so I broke them down, not only so that I can make sense of it, but also because at the time it was working for me. And like I said earlier, I'm gonna work on a one fits all solution later on. But this one is responsible, is a mechanic that's responsible for the curve moving along, the snake moving along the curve, right? The distance or the path or whatever. And the cool thing about this particular object is that it's not a curve, but it's a mesh, right? Let's zoom in. There we go. So yeah, let me isolate it. There we go. So this particular object, like I said, is a mesh, right? So let me go to the edit mode so you guys can see. So if we go to edit mode and wireframe it, you see that it's just a line, basically, right? It's a line of vertices that is the same size as the snake. And I attached and constrained this mesh object or this line for it to move along, to be deformed by the curve, right? Now, the movement of this particular object moves the entire object, because what you can do in Blender, which is kind of cool, is that you can attach your bones to follow vertices, right? So what I did was that I attached bones so that they can follow these little points over here and be deformed by them, which is kind of cool, right? Right, okay, let's go back. So the reason why it looks like this is because I just put a skin modifier to it so that for visual purposes, so that I can see where it is at any time in space. All right, so then let's go back. So those are the two main mechanics that I'm using to move the snake. I'm gonna put an update to this. If you guys want to look at it, I'm gonna also put a basic version of the snake rig so that you guys can learn about the basic mechanics. And I'm gonna update it. I've already worked on an update for this rig. This one is like version 2. I'm already working on version 3, but I don't want to wait a long time without releasing something so that you guys can see that I'm almost done with another rig. Alright guys, before I go, also thank you to the patrons, the guys that supported the channel in January and February. I'm going to put up their names in about a second. There we go. Thank you to these guys for supporting the channel, taking a look at the rigs. Most of these rigs, I am using them in production, right? So as I'm developing them, I'm using them also. And I'm going to be updating most of the rigs. That goes for the mouth rig and the snake rig, the one that I'm currently working on right now. And any other rigs that I'm going to come up with later in the future. I'm sure I'm going to come up with tons of rigs that I'm going to be using. And then once I build these rigs, I'm going to give them away to the patrons. If you want to take a jab at it and look at it, use it, and maybe improve upon it. The only thing is just give me credit. That's all I ask for. But thank you guys, man. Thank you guys for supporting the channel, and please continue to do so until I release this game. I'm planning on putting out a trailer sometime in the coming months. But for now, thank you guys for supporting the channel, man. I appreciate it. It's much appreciated. And yeah, that's all I have for you guys today.